To unpack some of the dynamics around the gender pay gap, I'm now joined by Dr. Laura Fisher, Head of Institutional Advancement at Boston City Campus. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Fisher. Thanks very much for your time. One would have thought that, you know, with what has been happening in South Africa over the years, more and more women ascending, taking positions of responsibility. Yes, I mean, men are still in the majority. That by now, the wage gap for one would have been incredibly, I mean, narrowed to a very large extent.
I agree with you that that's what one would think, for sure. And unfortunately, on the ground, the wage gap is still actually quite large. I did a quick little calculation, and on average, for every 1,000 rand that a man makes in this country, a woman will make 780 rand. So, you know, there is still this gender pay gap that is persistent. And women are still earning approximately 28% less than their male counterparts, according to the World Economic Forum report. So unfortunately, there has been some improvement, but it's about a 0.3% closure in the gap.
Do we know what is perpetuating it?
I think that there's a lot of dynamics that need to be considered when thinking about what perpetuates it. I think that the disparity is an array of different factors. Education and experience obviously contribute in large part to the gender pay gap disparity. Interestingly, you know, there's actually more women, more girls and women enrolled in both basic education and higher education. And yet, when it comes to them getting into the labor market, there's many less women who are coming into the labor market. So their participation in the labor market is a lot lower than men's. And I think that that is one of the, you know, the really big factors. I think that there's ongoing discrimination and bias that plays a significant role. Yes, there's still unconscious stereotypes and biases that affect women's career advancement and salary growth. So, for example, the unconscious bias and stereotype that women are less committed to their careers because of family responsibilities can definitely affect hiring decisions and opportunities for growth within companies. And then there's also, you know, sort of the backlash of sexism and sexist behavior and penalties for women taking maternity leave or career breaks while they're having babies. So all of this serves to perpetuate ongoing industry segregation. And there's also occupational segregation that we must consider. You know, there's certain occupations that sort of are more female dominated, like your education sector, your nursing sector, your health sector, and obviously the domestic work sector as well. And these sectors, if we link it back to what's going on in the higher education and training space, less women are enrolling into the STEM subjects. And so there's then less of them in the marketplace. So there's only 23% of STEM graduates are actually female graduates, which then puts them at a disadvantage because those are the better paying jobs. So, you know, there's a whole host of factors that need to be considered, I think.
Now, the World Economic Forum report that you cited also records the fact that there are countries around the world that have closed at least 80% of their gender gaps. Countries like Iceland, for example, are being mentioned, and our neighbor Namibia is up there in the top 10. What are these countries doing that the rest of us aren't doing?
I think that they're probably doing quite a lot that is different, right from basic education all the way through to tertiary education and then into the labor market. So ultimately, we need to close this gap. And what they are doing is they are investing in women so that they can attract and retain top talent, regardless of female or male. This leads to improved productivity and competitiveness, which sort of perpetuates then a cycle where there isn't these social justice issues and women are receiving equal pay and equal work opportunities, which is obviously a very empowering space to be in. And that leads to a more prosperous future. So, you know, South Africa's got a lot to learn from this, because until we start to close this gender pay gap, we continue to perpetuate historical inequalities, and we aren't creating an equitable society, which I think is why it's so important for us to really rewind and say, you know, what's going on in education? Where is the discrimination? Where is the occupational segregation? How are we splitting out caregiving responsibilities and negotiating barriers? So I think that, you know, all of those sorts of things are the issues that those kinds of countries have been addressing for quite some time.
But also, I mean, we need to talk about, I mean, the role that investors, shareholders, but also just employees, I mean, play in reporting, including even or going to the extent of naming and shaming, I mean, those that are pathetic.
I will reserve a comment there.
But they okay. Maybe I'm being facetious here, but I mean, shareholders, investors do have a responsibility to actually ensure that their companies are, you know, do what is necessary, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it is important that companies are very, very mindful of the fact that women do need to be empowered. And women do need to be given equal opportunity. And actually, interestingly enough, you know, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange top 40 companies, many of them, to give them their credit, are doing a lot in terms of the advancement of women. So there is representation on company boards, and there is representation. For example, the Bidvest Group is doing phenomenal work. The Impala Platinum Group is doing phenomenal work as well. They've achieved gender parity. So it's not impossible. It's just something that we have to work towards.
No, but also, I mean, those organizations or bodies that get given the responsibility to actually do, I mean, their work. I mean, we do have the Employment Equity Act in this country. We do also have the Employment Equity Commission's annual report, which should highlight these things and bring them to the attention of everybody.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we all long to see the gender pay disparity closed. And the long-term impact of us not closing it is far-reaching and is devastating. Women's reduced earning potential perpetuates poverty. It perpetuates an intergenerational poverty approach that girls are then looking to women who are not empowered. So we really do need to do a lot to address this gender pay gap.
And that's why we're going to leave it for now. Let me thank you very much, Dr. Fisher, for your time and insights this afternoon.